They told you that loyalty is the highest virtue, didn't they? That to be loyal means to be good, noble, honorable. They told you loyalty is the glue of relationships, the foundation of nations, the blood that binds families, the soul of service. But what if I told you that everything you've ever believed about loyalty was a lie? A beautiful, seductive lie designed not to liberate you, but to imprison you. You see, from the moment you could understand language, the world began whispering obedience in your ears. Loyalty to your parents, loyalty to your school, loyalty to your country, loyalty to your employer, loyalty to your religion, and perhaps most dangerously, loyalty to people who demand it but never deserve it. It was never a lesson in virtue, it was training, psychological conditioning, a slow and subtle erosion of your ability to question, to detach, to walk away when your soul screams that something is wrong. You were not taught loyalty for your sake. You were taught it so you could be controlled, because loyalty, when manipulated, becomes the sharpest tool of psychological slavery. When someone asks for your loyalty, what they're really asking is for your submission cloaked in nobility. They want your silence when they wrong you, your patience when they neglect you, your commitment when they have long abandoned theirs. They want you tied to them not by love or logic, but by guilt, history, sentiment. And so you stay, not because it serves your growth, but because you've been led to believe that leaving would make you disloyal, ungrateful, even cruel. But tell me this, what has loyalty ever guaranteed you? Has your unwavering support protected you from betrayal? Has your lifelong allegiance stopped those in power from discarding you the moment you were no longer useful? History is filled with the bones of the loyal, forgotten soldiers, betrayed advisors, abandoned followers. Meanwhile, those who rise, those who rule, those who truly live, they understand something others don't. That loyalty is a currency most often spent, but rarely reciprocated. The ones in power love loyal people. They feed them just enough praise to keep them tethered, just enough hope to keep them waiting, just enough fear to keep them obedient. They shape a narrative where questioning authority is treason, where self-preservation is selfishness, and where walking away is weakness. They don't want thinkers, they want believers, not partners, servants, because loyalty, once weaponized, becomes the perfect illusion, making you believe you're virtuous when in fact you're only shackled. And what's worse, loyalty rarely flows upward. It's expected downward, demanded from those below. You, the employee, must remain loyal to a company that would replace you in a heartbeat. You, the citizen, must be loyal to leaders who lie. You, the child, must be loyal to parents who may have never earned that trust. But if you ask for loyalty back, if you dare demand it from those above, they call you entitled, ungrateful, insolent. The hypocrisy isn't hidden. It's normalized. This is the cold logic of power, not built on truth, but on control. And loyalty is control disguised as honor. It's how tyrants keep subjects quiet, how corporations keep workers exploited, how manipulators keep victims trapped. It's how they convince you to light yourself on fire to keep others warm, to carry a system that would crush you if you ever stopped walking. But there is a moment rare, electrifying, when you begin to question. When you feel the fracture between what you were told and what you now see. When you finally understand that you do not owe loyalty to anyone who exploits your silence. That realization is not betrayal. It is awakening, the beginning of inner freedom. Because only when you release the chains of blind allegiance can you finally see who you are beneath the labels and obligations. You begin to see that your worth was never in how tightly you clung to others, but in how courageously you stood alone when standing was the hardest thing to do. That freedom doesn't come from following, but from choosing. That integrity isn't about staying, it's about knowing when to leave, Those who taught you loyalty taught it because they feared your independence. They feared your clarity, your ability to discern, your capacity to walk away from the systems that fed off your compliance. But here's what they never expected, that one day you would stop asking for permission to be free. That one day you'd choose to honor truth over tradition. That you'd stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even offer you a bandage. Because once you stop giving loyalty blindly, your energy shifts. You stop performing, you stop enduring, you stop living according to the narratives written by others. Instead, you build your own story. You become the author of your decisions, the architect of your values. You begin to understand that true connection is not forced through loyalty, it is formed through mutual respect, earned trust, and shared truth. And that is where the old system begins to shake, because nothing terrifies it more than a person who can no longer be manipulated by guilt, tradition, or fear. When you reclaim your loyalty and give it only where it is earned, not demanded, you become dangerous, not to others, but to illusions. You stop being a pawn, you start being a player, you stop being a servant, you become a sovereign. They told you loyalty was a virtue, but they never told you who defined it, who benefits from it, or what it costs you. That's because loyalty was never meant to serve you. It was engineered, constructed, shaped like clay by the hands of those who wanted your obedience without your resistance. Loyalty is not something you were born with. It's something you were taught, and not for your own liberation, but for your limitation. You were trained to associate loyalty with love, morality, and identity, but this was not a lesson in ethics. It was psychological programming. From childhood, institutions have carved the idea into your mind that being loyal is being good. But good for whom? For you, or for those who profit from your silence, your sacrifice, your submission. Look closely and you'll see that loyalty isn't a natural instinct. It's a carefully sculpted cultural product. Children do not instinctively feel loyal to systems or structures. They feel loyal to experiences, to safety, to kindness. But they are molded early through schools, religions, families, to transfer that natural trust to institutions, symbols, flags, beliefs. It becomes a badge of pride, a tool for belonging. And once it's woven into your identity, it becomes hard to question. You stop seeing loyalty as a choice and start seeing it as a moral obligation. This is where the trap is laid, because once loyalty becomes part of who you think you are, disloyalty feels like betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. That's the genius of the design. If those in power can convince you that loyalty is synonymous with morality, they never have to earn your support. They never have to justify their actions. You'll keep showing up, keep defending, keep enduring, because your loyalty is no longer about logic, it's about emotion. It's about staying aligned with the image of yourself that you've been taught to hold dear, the loyal friend, the loyal worker, the loyal believer. This is why loyalty becomes the most effective emotional leash. It ties your identity to your actions in a way that feels unbreakable, even when you're suffering, even when you're ignored, even when the cost of your loyalty is your own peace. What makes this so dangerous is how loyalty is weaponized in subtle, invisible ways. It's wrapped in honor and tradition, disguised as something noble, but behind the curtains, it's being used to maintain hierarchies, to suppress dissent, to discourage rebellion. The idea that loyal people don't ask questions is a cornerstone of nearly every power structure. Questioning is painted as disrespect, criticism is seen as betrayal, independence is labeled as arrogance. So you stay quiet, you bite your tongue, you swallow your instincts, all in the name of loyalty, and in doing so, you begin to shrink yourself to fit into systems that were never designed for your growth, only your utility. And here's what makes it even more insidious. The more loyal you are, the more expendable you become. Because once you've shown that you won't challenge, won't leave, won't think for yourself, you are no longer seen as valuable. You're seen as predictable. Those in power don't respect unthinking loyalty, they exploit it. They know you won't walk away, so they stop trying to deserve your presence. You become a fixture, not a force, and all the while you keep believing you're doing the right thing. Because the narrative has been so deeply rooted that you've confused loyalty with righteousness. But righteousness without awareness becomes servitude. You'll notice, too, how loyalty is never equally expected. It is almost always demanded from the bottom up. The worker is expected to be loyal to the company, even when the company cuts wages or overworks them. The citizen is expected to be loyal to the government, even when the government lies. The follower is expected to be loyal to the leader, even when the leader betrays every principle they preached. But if that loyalty is ever challenged in return, if the worker demands loyalty from the company, if the citizen holds the government accountable, if the follower questions the leader, they are met with dismissal, with shame, with punishment. That's how you know it was never about mutual respect. It was about control. The system survives because loyalty keeps people in place. It's not just about submission. It's about emotional captivity. And the more idealistic you are, the more they rely on your loyalty to keep you trapped. Because idealists won't rebel if they think they're holding a moral high ground. They won't abandon institutions if they believe they're protecting a legacy. So they stay, not out of benefit, but out of belief. They remain loyal to a system that would abandon them the second it becomes convenient. And so the illusion continues generation after generation. You were never asked to be loyal for your sake. You were trained to be loyal so you'd be easier to manage. And once loyalty is manufactured, it doesn't just stop at being a passive concept. It becomes a powerful lever of emotional obligation, twisting your own sense of right and wrong into a tool used against you. This is the next stage of control. The illusion is not merely in being taught to be loyal, it's in being emotionally punished for not being loyal. When loyalty is instilled deep enough, it begins to override your inner compass. You stop asking, "Is this right for me?" and instead ask, "Will I be seen as disloyal if I say no?" That's how the trap tightens, not with chains on your body, but with guilt in your mind. You're not just afraid of consequences anymore. You're afraid of being judged, of being the one who left, the one who questioned, the one who stopped giving endlessly. You're told that to pull away is to betray, that to change your mind is to abandon, and so your emotions are manipulated not by what's true, but by what you've been told is loyal. Emotional blackmail becomes common, cloaked in phrases like "after all I've done for you," or "you owe me this." The moment someone frames your choices as a debt to your past, they are not appealing to your values. They are tightening their grip on your conscience. And this emotional distortion is not accidental. It is strategic. The more you feel guilty, the less likely you are to resist. Those who demand loyalty are often the very people who know they can't justify their actions through integrity or fairness, so they lean on emotional pressure. They want you to feel ashamed for even considering your own boundaries. They want you to second, guess your instincts and question your discomfort. That's how emotional control works. It's not loud and obvious, it's subtle, disguised as care, disguised as history, disguised as duty. Think of the moments in your life when you've stayed longer than you should have, in jobs that drained you, in relationships that diminished you, in institutions that silenced you. Were you staying because it was right, or because walking away felt like disloyalty? That emotional confusion is the exact outcome those in power desire. It keeps you conflicted, torn between what you feel and what you're told you should feel. And while you're battling yourself internally, you're less likely to rebel externally. This is especially evident in environments of authority, workplaces, religious institutions, families, and even governments. The most common tactic is emotional moralization. They don't just tell you to stay loyal, they make you feel wrong for wanting something different. They paint you as disloyal for evolving, for questioning, for choosing peace over obligation. They weaponize your empathy against you. They know you don't want to hurt others. They know you value relationships, service, consistency, and they use that emotional fabric to keep you entangled. It's not manipulation by force, it's manipulation by emotional debt. And what makes this control more sinister is that it often hides behind masks of kindness. A boss who says, "We're like family here," doesn't mean they'll treat you like family. They mean they want your loyalty like family. They want you to put up with unfairness, to sacrifice without question, to stay silent through discomfort. A religious leader who says, "We are your spiritual home," may not be offering you spiritual growth. They may be demanding your obedience. Even in personal relationships, someone might say, "If you truly loved me, you'd stay." But love is not measured in how much of yourself you're willing to abandon. In all these cases, what they're really doing is attaching morality to compliance. They make you feel that being loyal is a sign of goodness, and questioning is a flaw in your character. And the fear of being seen as selfish or ungrateful becomes more powerful than the actual suffering you're experiencing. You begin to suppress your own truth, all to avoid the sting of being labeled a traitor, a quitter, a betrayer. But loyalty that's demanded through guilt is not loyalty at all, it's coercion. And this emotional coercion is so effective because it teaches you to police yourself. You no longer need someone watching over you. You start doing their work for them. You silence your own rebellion. You tell yourself, maybe I'm being too sensitive, or maybe I owe them another chance. You rationalize mistreatment because the fear of being disloyal outweighs the clarity of your own inner discomfort. This is how emotional obligation distorts reality. You begin to betray yourself to stay loyal to others. The truth is, the more emotionally connected you are to an identity, the more susceptible you are to this form of control. The more you see your job, your relationship, your community as an inseparable part of your self-worth, the more vulnerable you become to emotional pressure, because now walking away doesn't just feel like leaving, it feels like losing a piece of who you are. And so they keep you locked in, not with bars, but with your own attachment to loyalty. But once you begin to see the patterns, something shifts. You start to realize that guilt is not always a sign of wrongdoing. Sometimes it's just a sign that you've been trained to feel bad for doing what's best for you. And when that realization sinks in, the emotional fog begins to lift. You begin to separate your integrity from their expectations. You understand that boundaries are not betrayal, and walking away from manipulation is not disloyalty, it's strength. You stop being ruled by emotional debt and start making decisions rooted in truth, not obligation. And that's where real freedom begins. And as you begin to untangle yourself from emotional obligation, another harsh truth comes into focus. Loyalty, for all the weight it carries, offers no real protection. You could pour your energy, your time, your soul into being loyal, and still be discarded when it's convenient. That's the part they never tell you. While you're busy proving your allegiance, sacrificing your well-being, and staying committed through injustice or neglect, those in power are not bound by the same code. They are not obligated to return your loyalty. In fact, more often than not, they don't. You see it everywhere. the employee who stayed late every night for years, thinking their loyalty would earn them security, only to be replaced when budget cuts came. The friend who stood by someone's side through their worst, only to be left behind when success came calling. The partner who kept forgiving, kept compromising, kept trying, thinking love and loyalty were enough, only to be broken by betrayal. Loyalty is often romanticized as this unshakable foundation, but in reality, it's more often used as a cushion for others to fall back on when it suits them, not as a bond of mutual responsibility. And the deeper your loyalty runs, the more they test it. They push boundaries, they ask for more, they take more, because they know you won't walk away. They know you'll justify their behavior, remind yourself of the history, tell yourself you're doing the right thing. But here's the ugly truth: loyalty is not inherently rewarded. It's exploited, not maliciously in every case, but predictably, because when people know you won't leave, they stop trying to keep you, your presence becomes expected, your sacrifices become normalized. You're not valued, you're used. This is where the cost of loyalty becomes dangerous. You stay in relationships that no longer nurture you. You keep showing up in environments that drain you. You justify silence in the face of injustice. All because you've been conditioned to believe that loyalty, no matter how painful, is noble, that to stay is to be strong, that to endure is to be righteous. But what if the very thing you're staying loyal to is what's keeping you small, stifled, invisible? The system depends on you not asking that question. It depends on your belief that your sacrifice has meaning, that your loyalty will one day be recognized, validated, rewarded. But look around. How many people do you see who gave their all only to be forgotten? How many loyal workers retire with broken bodies and no appreciation? How many loyal citizens are fed empty promises and false hope? How many loyal followers are left confused when their leaders turn corrupt or indifferent? The world is full of people who are loyal and left with nothing, and this creates a cruel contradiction. You're asked to be loyal even when it costs you everything, but those above you aren't expected to return that loyalty unless it serves them. That's not loyalty, that's a power imbalance masquerading as virtue. If loyalty were truly reciprocal, it would require mutual accountability, mutual respect, mutual care. But in reality, the people who demand the most loyalty often give the least in return. They rely on your fear of being seen as disloyal to keep you quiet while they act without conscience. Over time, you internalize this imbalance. You tell yourself that maybe this is just how life works. That being loyal is a burden the strong must carry, that good people endure. But that's not strength, it's programming. Real strength is knowing when your loyalty is being abused and having the courage to withdraw it. Because when loyalty becomes self-sacrifice without limit, it's no longer loyalty, it's self-erasure. This doesn't mean you stop being loyal altogether. It means you become discerning. You give your loyalty where it is earned, where it is returned, where it contributes to your growth instead of consuming it. Because loyalty should never require you to betray yourself. It should never ask you to shrink, to suffer, to stay silent. Loyalty is not measured by how much pain you can endure, but by how aligned it is with truth, mutual respect, and real connection. But the lie runs deep, and so does the fear. You worry that walking away will make you look disloyal, that choosing yourself will be judged as selfish. But what's truly selfish is asking someone to stay loyal to a dynamic that harms them. And what's truly powerful is recognizing when you've given enough, when the loyalty you've offered has become a leash rather than a bond. Because until you realize that loyalty alone doesn't protect you, you'll keep offering it as if it's a shield, when in reality it's often the very thing leaving you exposed. The freedom to reclaim your energy begins with understanding that loyalty must be a choice, not a sentence. It must be mutual, not manipulated. And above all, it must evolve. Because if the bond no longer serves your soul, it is not betrayal to let it go. It is wisdom. And once you've faced the truth, that loyalty is manufactured, emotionally weaponized, and rarely reciprocated, you begin to sense a deeper realization emerging beneath the disillusionment, that your freedom doesn't begin with loyalty. It begins the moment you let it go. Real freedom is not found in how tightly you can hold on, but in your ability to release what no longer aligns with your integrity, your peace, your growth. This is the shift they never want you to make, the moment when your mind detaches from the illusion that loyalty is a measure of worth, and you begin to reclaim your right to choose your own path without guilt. When you finally stop asking, "What will they think of me if I leave?" and start asking, "What will happen to me if I stay?" you step into power. You start listening to your instincts instead of your conditioning. You start measuring the cost of staying silent, the emotional toll of giving endlessly, the spiritual suffocation of being tied to people, systems, and beliefs that no longer reflect your truth. That moment of reckoning is terrifying because it threatens every story you've told yourself about who you are, but it's also liberating because the deeper truth is the person you thought you were under loyalty was often just the version of you that others needed you to be. And there's grief in letting that version die. There's fear you may lose people, you may lose status, you may walk away from something you once built your identity around, but what you gain is clarity, space, sovereignty. You start moving not from fear of being labeled disloyal, but from the strength of being self-directed. This shift is quiet at first. You begin saying no more often. You stop explaining yourself to people who only listen to respond, not understand. You start building boundaries where before there were only expectations, and something beautiful begins to unfold. You find that you no longer need external validation to feel grounded, because the weight of your decisions now comes from inner truth, not emotional obligation. You begin to realize how much of your life was shaped by silent agreements you never consciously made. Agreements to stay small, agreements to keep the peace, agreements to carry other people's burdens while ignoring your own. And most of those agreements were held together by loyalty, unquestioned, reflexive binding. When you walk away from those contracts, you don't become selfish. You become sovereign. You stop bleeding for causes that don't heal you. You stop confusing endurance with strength. You stop mistaking self-betrayal for virtue, and this newfound freedom is not reckless. It is intentional. You don't abandon people who matter. You simply stop betraying yourself for those who don't. You begin to attract relationships built on mutual choice, not guilt. You work with people who respect your time, not just your obedience. You follow leaders who inspire through action, not manipulation. You create spaces where questioning is welcomed, not punished, because you now know that real connection is built not on coerced loyalty, but on shared values, open communication, and mutual respect. As your inner world becomes untangled from the web of manufactured loyalty, your outer world begins to reflect that clarity. You notice how much noise was in your life simply from trying to please, to prove, to stay aligned with systems you had outgrown. That noise begins to fall away. You speak more simply, you act more decisively, you rest without guilt, you create without fear, and this isn't just personal healing, it's a revolution, because the world doesn't change through obedience. It changes through clarity, through people who dare to ask, what if loyalty to truth matters more than loyalty to tradition? And that question ripples into every part of your life. You begin to audit your loyalties not with emotion, but with awareness. Is this job honoring my vision? Is this relationship honoring my heart? Is this belief honoring my soul? If not, then, no matter how long you've stayed, no matter how many years you've invested, you give yourself permission to walk away. Not because you're disloyal, but because you've evolved. They won't teach you that in school. They won't celebrate it from stages, because free people are harder to control. People who think for themselves can't be manipulated through shame. People who know their worth don't tolerate systems that diminish them. And that's why letting go of blind loyalty is the most radical act of self-respect you can commit. It's not about rebellion. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you who to be. And the more you move in that awareness, the more you attract others doing the same. Your circle tightens but deepens. Your energy refines. Your focus sharpens. You become someone who doesn't need to demand loyalty, because the relationships around you are no longer built on power or pressure. They are built on presence, on choice, on truth. You stop trying to be everything to everyone and start being fully yourself with the few who see you clearly. And in that space there is peace, not because you followed the rules of loyalty, but because you broke free from them.